We were drinking one night, and a friend of mine was on the football team. He was a very good friend of mine, and he brought a couple of his friends over, so I didn't think anything of it. We drank in my room for a long time, played drinking games and stuff, and this one guy just, now that I look back on it, just kept going, "Hey, Laura, you drink this, I'll race you to see who can drink fastest." And at the time, I didn't think anything of it. He was on the football team, he was known, I just didn't question my safety at all. Now I look back and I think he knew exactly what he was doing. It ended up that a bunch of people went down dancing. I didn't feel like going. He said he'd stay here and talk to me for a while, and I said that was fine. And he started making advances. I just, very calmly, I didn't want to make a big deal of it. Hey, look, I don't want anything to happen. He had a girlfriend at the time. I said, look, you have a girlfriend, this isn't right, leave it at that. And I thought that was understood, and it wasn't. He, from there, I guess, that's apparent. He raped me, and I think that there's no way he could have, there's no way he didn't know it was wrong. He knew it was wrong, because I said no the whole time. And it can't be normal if someone's crying when you're having sex with them, so. And afterwards, he just looked straight in my eyes and said, "Don't tell anybody, because I'll deny it, and they'll believe me, and they won't believe you, and you'll be sorry." Coming from a football player that's 5 times bigger than I am, that's the only thing that stuck in my mind.
One in 4 women surveyed were victims of rape or attempted rape. The percentage of false rape reports is identical to the false reports of other crimes, 2%. 84% of those raped knew their attacker. 57% of the rapes happened on dates.
For sexual intercourse without consent, it's a very simple definition. It's just knowingly having sexual intercourse without consent with another person. All of the restrictions have been taken out. It doesn't have to be of the opposite sex anymore. It doesn't eliminate married people, so that you can have a rape between married people or between homosexuals or between same sex anyway. Again, the without consent means that the victim is compelled to submit by force against himself or another, and force is defined as the infliction, the attempted infliction, or threatened infliction of bodily injury on the person. And then there's a brand new section from the last legislature that added the threat of substantial retaliatory action. And of course that was a school case where I believe it was a principal or a teacher anyway that threatened the student if she didn't have sex with him that she would not pass. It's not only a matter that she doesn't consent, he has to know that she doesn't consent, so she does have to say or do something that lets him know that she's not consenting, or we really can't pursue the case. If she just accepts it and says later, well, I didn't want to say anything because I was embarrassed or afraid or something, it probably isn't a case we can pursue. We have to prove to a jury that he knew she wasn't consenting, so that's a very important part. There are 3 other occasions in the law that apply to non-consent too. If you can't consent because you're mentally defective or incapacitated, so I assume if you're drugged or you're just mentally incapable, then that is also without consent. Or if you're physically helpless or you're less than 16. So if you're less than 16, you can't consent. So it's always a crime if the person is under 16. And as for the perpetrator, that's never a defense. For burglary or robbery or homicide or rape or anything, it's not a defense that they were drunk. Well, from a legal standpoint, the very best thing to do is report it immediately and get right to a doctor immediately. It just makes our case so much better and so much stronger. It's certainly possible to come back days or months or even years later and report it, but obviously in the first place any evidence is gone, any witnesses are gone, and it's just hard to tell a jury that it really happened. It's very unlikely that a man will do it once. very unlikely. He's going to do it again and again. It's something about his makeup that he thinks it's appropriate to force himself on other people, and if he gets away with it once, he'll just be encouraged more and more, and I think it's highly, highly unlikely that he will only do it once. I think it would be very sad if you were working in the field and weren't affected by it. It would be a real shame. I guess the way I react to it is just to use it. That's what gets me fired up to do a case and to do a good trial, is to really care about the victims and want to do a good job for them. But you're right, you don't ever forget it either. I've had some rape cases that I'll never forget and were very painful. But you just learn to live with it, I guess.
It was a low point in my life. The war in Vietnam, which I, along with thousands of other college students, took to the streets to oppose, was becoming more bloody at home and abroad. In unrelated violence, a friend I loved was murdered that spring by a teenage gang. A few weeks after my friend's murder, I ended a relationship with my boyfriend, whom I will call Carl. Carl and I parted on unpleasant terms, with me wanting a clean break, him wanting another chance. He left town and traveled for a while with no clear plans. One day, about 2 months after our breakup, Carl appeared at my apartment door, entreating me to talk to him, to get back together. I told him I wasn't interested in reviving the relationship. He began to shout that he would kill himself if I wouldn't speak with him. I had loved this man once and felt guilty that I was making him so unhappy. I thought that he really might try to commit suicide. I agreed to go outside to talk with him. Once outside, he insisted that I go with him to a mutual friend's apartment where he was staying. According to Carl, that friend wanted to see me and had said that we would all have dinner together. We could talk there, he said. It never occurred to me that Carl was lying. I thought that maybe our friend could help me convince Carl that the relationship was really over. The friend's apartment was in a part of the city that I wasn't familiar with. I can still remember climbing up the stairs to the apartment, thinking how glad I was that our friend would be there. I stepped into the apartment, calling out his name. Behind me, I heard the thunk of a door bolt. I turned, and Carl was standing, grinning. Needless to say, our friend was not in the apartment. Carl had known that when he brought me there. I immediately believed that I could die. If I had any doubts, he removed them moments later by telling me that he was going to kill me. As the night progressed, he continued to threaten to kill me and then himself if I refused to renew our relationship.
I'm so angry at you.
He only let me out of his sight to use the bathroom.
Can I please go by you? Do I have to jump over you? Thanks.
I discovered there were no windows. I could have yelled for help, but I did not. My reasons were contradictory, yet I didn't know where I was or who might come. I didn't want to embarrass Carl or myself. I still felt I could talk him out of the situation, and I was afraid that my yelling would only make him angrier and put me in more danger. When late into the night he motioned to the bedroom, I followed. In bed, he draped his arm across me. He had intercourse with me at least once, but I think it might have been more than that. It seemed to go on for a long time. I felt like I was in the corner of the room, watching the bed from a distance. Eventually he fell asleep. I did not move. I did not holler. I did not try to leave. In the morning, Carl walked me back to my apartment. We parted company about a block from my door at my insistence. Although I think he agreed because he didn't want to risk running into my roommates. When I finally got inside, I stripped off my clothes and stood in the shower for an hour. I did not go to work that day.